So, today, we're going to dig into a small rule change that actually had a huge impact on the experts who guide us through what's probably the biggest purchase you'll ever make, buying a home. It's all about a rule change that makes sure the best pros can help you out, no matter where they happen to live or work.
I mean, just think about it. Buying a house. It's this crazy maze of paperwork, right? And financial jargon, and just so many decisions. It can be totally overwhelming. So who's that person you rely on to guide you through all of that, from the application all the way to getting the keys?
Well, that guide, that expert, is the mortgage loan originator, or MLO for short. This is the person who's working side by side with you, the borrower, to get that whole home loan transaction done and dusted. You can almost think of them as your personal project manager for the entire mortgage process.
But here's the thing, these guides can't just do whatever they want. They're actually bound by a pretty strict set of rules and regulations, and all of it is designed with one thing in mind, protecting you, the consumer.
So where do all these rules even come from? Well, it all starts with something called the SAFE Act.
To really get why the SAFE Act exists, we've got to rewind the clock a bit, back to the financial crisis of 2007-2008. Remember all that turmoil in the housing market? Well, in response, Congress passed the Secure and Fair Enforcement for Mortgage Licensing Act. Yep, that's the SAFE Act, back in 2008.
And the goal here? It was crystal clear. They wanted to seriously ramp up consumer protection and accountability in the mortgage industry. Basically, the whole point was to create a really high, consistent standard for every single MLO out there to make the whole system safer for all of us.
And believe me, when I say high standard, I mean it. You're talking about 20 hours of required education, passing a tough national exam, going through a full FBI background check with fingerprinting, and even submitting a 10-year work history and a credit report. The takeaway here is that becoming an MLO is no joke. It's a serious process, and it's all designed to make sure only the most qualified and trustworthy people are handling your loan.
Okay, so these rules are great for safety, but they accidentally created a huge problem. Kind of like a professional traffic jam.
Yeah, just think about it for a second. You've got this super qualified professional who's jumped through all these hoops. What happens if they need to move to a new state? Or maybe they just want to switch from, say, a big bank to a smaller mortgage company.
And this is where things got really tricky. See, MLOs basically fall into two different buckets. If you work at a big bank, you're usually registered nationally. That registration works everywhere. But if you work for a non-bank lender, which is a lot of them, you have to get a separate license for every single state you want to do business in. A whole new process for each one.
Now, before 2018, this was a massive headache. If an MLO wanted to move states or switch from a bank to a state-licensed company, they had to hit the brakes. They had to completely stop working. Yep, couldn't originate a single loan. They were just stuck in limbo, sometimes for months, waiting for that new license to come through. It created this huge bottleneck.
So this licensing logjam? Yeah, it wasn't good for anyone, not for the professionals, and definitely not for a competitive market. So in 2018, Congress stepped in with a fix. That fix came in the form of a new law, the Economic Growth, Regulatory Relief, and Consumer Protection Act. It's a mouthful, I know. What's important is that it was an amendment to the original SAFE Act, and it was designed to cut right through all that red tape without sacrificing any of the safety standards. And the key to this whole solution is a concept called transitional authority. You might also hear it called temporary authority. Basically, what it does is it gives qualified MLOs a temporary green light. It lets them keep originating loans while they're finishing up the specific requirements for their new state or new job.
So, how does this actually work? Well, the rules are pretty specific. If you're an MLO moving from a bank to a state-licensed company, you've got to have been registered for at least the last year. And if you're already state-licensed and just moving to a different state, the requirement is a lot shorter. You just need to have been licensed for the past 30 days. The idea is to make sure these are experienced pros, not rookies. If you meet those conditions, bam, you get the benefit. You can keep working.
But for how long, you ask? The law gives them 120 days. That's a solid 4-month window to get all your ducks in a row, finish up any state-specific education, pass any tests, all without having to put your career on pause and lose income. Okay, so that's the nitty-gritty of the rule change. But let's get to the real question. Why should any of this matter to you if you're thinking about buying a home?
Well, this little change actually has a pretty big ripple effect that can benefit you directly. It means that really talented, experienced MLOs can move around more easily. They can go to the markets where they're needed most. And that mobility, it fires up the competition between mortgage companies. They have to compete harder for the best talent, which means they also have to compete harder for your business. And for you, the homebuyer, a more competitive market almost always means better service, more choices, and hey, maybe even better rates.
At the end of the day, this is all about finding the right balance. The goal isn't just to pile on rules. It's to build a system that's safe for us, the consumers, but also one that works smoothly for the industry itself. This change was a really smart step in that direction.
And all this really brings up a much bigger question, doesn't it? This law was one specific attempt to strike that balance. But as the market keeps changing, as technology evolves, the question is always going to be there. How do we keep balancing strong consumer protection with the kind of professional freedom that drives a healthy, competitive market? And finding the right answer to that, well, that's absolutely crucial for the future of the housing market.